There we go. Okay, that's recording now. Just ignore the record part and we'll just have a discussion. And so once again, for anyone who's listening, there are 2 or 3 listeners out there. Welcome. I'm Glenn, as you know, and this morning I'm chatting with Gary Gale, who's in London, and it's not morning for him. So welcome, Gary.
Thanks, Glenn. Nice to be here, and welcome to the little corner of southwest London, which seems to be very, very quiet at the moment for some strange reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard stories. It's been interesting this week. I've been talking with people all over in different places, and we all seem to have different rules in place. I heard, yeah, London, what Boris has got you guys on total shutdown. So what does total shutdown mean? What do you?
Well, we're basically we are told that the NHS, the National Health Service, which we have here, they've reversed the acronym, which now means "Stay Home Now." So pretty much every business which isn't deemed to be essential has closed down. So supermarkets, petrol stations, the local convenience stores, and the pharmacies, they're all still open, but everything else is shut. And we're supposed to only go out once a day for exercise, walking the dog, or to go and get sort of essential supplies. But the sort of the devil's in the details, and it's not quite clear in some cases what essential means. So we've already had several politicians on the TV afterwards to sort of clarify this, and it varies really significantly around London as to how people, I think, are interpreting this.
Mm-hmm.
So some areas, it's not quite business as usual, but there's still a lot of people around. Other areas, I think more in the suburbs, which is where we are, it's very, very quiet. It's sort of Christmas Day quiet. And where I am is not that far away from Heathrow Airport, and also not that far away from one of the main trunk roads which goes out into the motorway system. So you've normally got plane noises going on overhead. You've got the constant background white noise of the traffic on the A316 leading into the M3. And I'm looking out my window right now, and it's a clear blue sky with absolutely no contrails in it coming in and out of Heathrow.
Mm-hmm.
And no background noise either. And so it's kind of eerie.
Yeah. No cars on the road at all.
No cars on the road. People are going to sort of the local store every so often, but they're doing this sort of waggle dance where they see someone coming down the road, so they cross over onto the other side of the road and then discover that there's somebody else on the other side of the road. So then there's people walking down the middle of the road, some of them wearing face masks, some of them not, some of them with sort of their winter scarves wrapped around their face.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a very, very bizarre sort of circumstance.
Yeah, that's crazy. Oh, excuse me, one sec. Alexa, stop. I heard something in the background. I realized the radio is still on.
See, Alexa's listening.
Yes, she's grabbing our conversation. Yeah. So it's fun to contrast that. Here we are. I wouldn't say lockdown. It's suggested that whoever can self-quarantine or self-isolate, I guess is a better term, do that. But largely, it seems like people are going out to do things. They're going to. It seems like a lot of people, I'm sure, are like going to the market or something almost every day just to get out. People are walking around. It's definitely not a full lockdown, that's for sure.
Well, I get the feeling at the moment they're trying to do it by consensus rather than enforcement. But if it doesn't quite work out the way they want it to, I think things will get quite harder and more rigid and more enforced quite quickly, which is It's scary. I mean, you know, when I grew up, I had parents who lived through the war, and they were talking about curfew, about blackout, and it's one of those things which you never really think you're going to experience in your lifetime, and then all of a sudden, you go to the local supermarket, and it is just like an empty warehouse full of shelving, and there's nothing there, and it's really disturbing and quite unsettling.
Right. Yeah. It's been interesting watching people's habits kind of unfold, right? Like with the whole, I don't know if it was the same in the UK, but the initial run on toilet paper and paper products.
Oh
Um,
man, that was ridiculous.
right. Um, I don't get it. All of a sudden, I mean, yeah, I went and I had a look, and okay, I've probably have several weeks supply of toilet paper as usual, right, in the cupboard. And so I wasn't panicking about that. I was probably more concerned, like, my God, how much beer is in the house, right? So
Well, yeah, absolutely, and we're particularly concerned on the caffeine levels as well.
right, yeah, you got to have your
But
coffees.
from talking to sort of friends and family who are around this area, it's also quite interesting to see how sort of different industry sectors are coping with this. So you know, I'm kind of used to working from home for periods of time, and with my current job, we always have some people in the team who you know, they either work from home from out of choice, or there's just something going on in their lives which means they need to do the ad hoc day. So we're quite well set up in that respect. Everything that we use is in the cloud,
Hmm.
and there's, short of those sort of, you know, the water cooler meetings and the sprint board that we have with loads of post-it notes on it to show what everybody's working on, there's nothing we physically need in the office apart from that sort of team spirit and camaraderie. Um, it took us maybe 2 or 3 days to sort of adjust to the fact that now we're all at home all of the time. But other industry sectors have been really finding it quite challenging to adopt to that. You know, my next door neighbor, they're used to having a VPN into their office because, of course, they've got all their servers and everything
Hmm.
is there in the office, and that's used to coping with maybe 2 or 3 people um, at any given time happening to need remote access. And now they've got like 300 people who all of a sudden need to sort of thread this very, very thin needle of VPN bandwidth with an extremely fat sausage of demand. That's a really disturbing mental image, actually. I'll
Right.
probably correct that. But you know, the systems just can't cope with it. And half of these people, they don't have office space at home. They don't even have laptops or a broadband connection which is capable of supporting this. So I think it's really difficult for some people to get their head into that mindset and to have everything that's set up.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I can only imagine. I mean, because the first time, kind of trying to get in through VPN and whatever kind of enterprise security protocols are set up, can, you know, that can be a little challenging for people. And then if you're dealing with people who have, right, varying capabilities and knowledge and skills, right? So made me think of my wife just got a job with HP, luckily great timing, several weeks ago, and her first day, it was the was the day that the whole company went remote. So hundreds of people, I could just imagine like the tech support required on their end to help get everyone set up, right?
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
And remote onboarding, that's going to be fun.
Yeah. But hey, it's a learning experience. If anything, probably, you know, some good things will come out of this. Right, we're being forced to adapt and adopt technologies that maybe some people have been putting off, you know, learning. Or so it's good. I've been doing this from home forever, so it's business as usual, really. But it's a good time to tackle new projects, for
It is.
sure.
I mean, the one thing I have noticed is my productivity has boosted because, of course, I don't have nigh on 3 hours of my day sitting on the cattle trucks that they call public transport in this city. So I can start at 8 here as the kids go off to their respective little areas to do their stuff. I can have a nice lunch with the family and then finish normally at a reasonable hour, and I can just walk downstairs. I don't have to sort of barge my way onto tube trains and onto the rail services, which is a tiring thing in itself. So
Right.
I guess you've got to look for a silver lining somewhere in that respect. And I also think this is bringing out some of the more altruistic aspects of some of the population. I wouldn't say all of it. I mean, there's been a lot of leaflet campaigns which have gone on locally with people saying, hey, if you're self-isolating, here I am, here's my mobile number. If you can't get out, I'll go shopping for you. If you're just going stir crazy from being inside, jump on the phone. And it is nice to see that people are maybe thinking a little bit about others, rather than just getting bogged down into that day-to-day suburban existence, which most of us have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. And I'm sure it's kind of human nature, especially for a lot of I'm sure that you and people and people at your company at the same time are thinking, well, okay, what kind of ideas could creep up out of this, right? Like what kind of innovations you might be seeing ideas for, like an app or a service that that we could use right now that doesn't exist, or
Oh,
it's
very much
yeah,
so. Yeah,
times
I
like
mean,
this you get the wheels turning.
I mean, Facebook must be making an absolute killing at the moment, because the number of local Facebook groups that we're finding out about, which have sprung up all around this area, has just gone insane. There was something I read about this morning. One of the major London hospitals have launched a geolocation-based app which you put onto your phone, and it's basically each day you check in, and it's like, are you ill? If so, what's the severity of your symptoms? Or are you well? And just to try and get that sort of, I think, more granular picture of what's going on with the population from people just contributing this information, because of course over here we still don't have any form of testing which is going on, and as a
Oh.
result of that, I think one of the things that all of the epidemiologists that you see doing the talking heads on the television are saying is, in order to measure the spread, you've got to have something that you can quantify, and not knowing how many people are healthy and how many people aren't makes it very, very difficult to pin down those numbers. So they're bandering around numbers each night on the evening news, and you can pretty much guarantee they're sort of estimates which will be on the best case rather than probably the worst case, to avoid alarming people. But it's nice to see that sort of very, very rapid tech innovation and iteration which is going on, and I fully expect to see quite a few more of those things coming out, as we find that maybe this is going to be going on for more than the initial 3 weeks that we're having in this country.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. More and more we're hearing talk that this is probably going to be a couple of months of dealing with this for sure. I don't think that would surprise anyone. Hopefully no more than that. When they start talking about through summer, that's a little daunting, but definitely. I mean, I thought of, actually I had a scare myself. You probably saw it, but took the precautions to get checked out. Because I wasn't feeling good when shortly after returning from Colorado, a couple weeks there. And, but that's the nasty thing about this virus is, the symptoms are so common of other things. It's allergy season right now, cold season. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it's all the pretty much same symptoms, right?
And I think it's okay to be a little bit paranoid as well.
Sure. Yep. Yep. You learn from it. So I was going to ask you when earlier I scoped out on LinkedIn. I was having a look at your profile, and so your company. We talk about that a bit. Kamma. Did I pronounce that right?
You absolutely did, yes.
Kamma. Yeah. So everyone at Kamma is working from home now, and it looks like now the company was in LinkedIn. It looked like you're associated with the real estate industry, right? And data-driven
Kind
company, yeah. So
Kinda, yeah. I mean, for a GeoGeek like myself, there's an awfully large amount of geospatial stuff which is going on there, which is good because at the end of the day, everything happens somewhere. So I think the best way of describing what it is we do is we're trying to make regulation usable through taking all of the devolved legislation that the government spits out to all of the local authorities all over the country. And they are under a legal obligation to make that available. But the definition of what available means varies immensely. So some of these government authorities, they have in-house GIS teams, they know what an API looks like and they produce very, very high quality data, but they are by far the minority. And so we take all of this information and through a series of bots which scrape and acquire this and try to bring order from chaos. So that's you know, looking at Excel spreadsheets, CSV files, which is still sort of the lingua franca of data transfer, PDFs, God help us, and in some cases, photographs that somebody in the council has taken of a local map, and then sort of Sharpie Gate style, they've drawn somewhere where this particular piece of legislation applies on it, and they photographed it and they've stuck it on their website and say, there you go, that's our rules, on you go. And it's incredibly difficult for people who have to stay in touch with all of this legislation to be able to be compliant with it, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. So we're trying to make data-driven services that allows people to do real-time monitoring on a very, very rapidly changing and quite capricious landscape. And it's good fun. It's good fun. So it's a nice equal measure of cutting edge sort of machine learned AI geotech, as well as something which really has a real world benefit, because especially the current sector that we've sort of chosen as the exemplar is what's called the UK HMO PRS, which is a rather grand acronym, which is so houses of multiple occupation. So in other words, rental properties in the public retail sector, where all over the country there's mandatory licensing under certain terms and conditions, but those terms and conditions vary all over the country and vary inside each local authority. So really, it's basically one massive point in polygon exercise. So for my property, where do I fit, and what affects me and what doesn't affect me? And that's ever changing, ever shifting boundaries of legislative polygons. And we're alerting our customers as to when those rules change, so that they don't get hit with a nasty fine.
Okay. So, and it sounds like the customers, they would be probably real estate developers and commercial, large commercial property holders.
They tend to be
right.
Landlords, and also the letting agents who lease these properties out, because they have what's called joint and several liability. So it's not like sort of the DMCA safe harbor provisions, where we're just a service provider, we're not responsible. These guys, if they're acting on behalf of a landlord, both the landlord is responsible as well as the agent who is actually doing the business.
Okay, good. So what's your reach? Is it all of the UK or beyond?
Currently it's UK, but geography knows no boundaries, tech knows no boundaries. So
Mm-hmm.
we are eyeing up other markets where we can sort of cookie cutter take this approach, both US, Europe, and slightly further overseas. But we've got to get this one nailed first before we try and overstretch ourselves. We're still a small company. We like to class ourselves as a scale up rather than a startup.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a case of us all wearing many hats. I'm allegedly CTO of the company, which basically means I do all of the official stuff that the job title implies. I also write code, and I make a damn good coffee when we're in the office as well as fixing the Wi-Fi and trying to find out why people's laptops won't print.
Perfect. Good. Well, that's important too. That is important. It's funny. So we were talking earlier about your internet connection at home, and I was thinking about that this week. And I know one thing, when I spend a fair bit of time in America, and I tell you that the home internet, so everybody's now working from home, but the home internet largely in America really sucks. I mean, it's it's bad, but it's so funny now how people are obviously realizing just how bad their home internet probably is, right? As they're logging in and doing things like this from home, and it's just terrible in America.
Well, we've been watching this with a certain amount of amusement, especially with the sort of the announcements that the likes of Comcast and Charter have been making recently, because the markets in the UK and in Europe are both on home broadband and on cellular comms are very different, and so my mobile or cell phone, that's on an all-you-can-eat data plan, and I pay probably about £17 a month for that. And,
wow, really?
Yeah.
17. Wow. Okay. I pay about 70, and that's 6 gigabyte. So on mine.
Exactly. And also the majority of our broadband connections, regardless of whether they're fiber or whether they're ADSL, they're uncapped. So pretty much your sort of gating factor is your bandwidth rather than the amount of data that you use. And so listening to the US ISPs going, oh no, we can't possibly do unlimited because think of this finite bandwidth that we've got. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, seeing as everybody's at home, we're just going to remove the caps, which really makes a mockery of what they've been saying for the past however many years, that the world will come to an end and all the networks will go down if they remove the caps.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. I think out of all when we all emerge from this, probably down there in the US, the screaming for decent internet and affordable internet and broadband is going to get even louder. But maybe I don't know. We have it a little better here in Canada, I think, but it's not cheap. That's for sure.
I mean, here it varies immensely in price. Most of the providers do sort of the triple play lock-in. So we get our fiber connection and our cable TV and the landline, which only scammers or people who are trying to sell us double glazing ever use these days. And our package is roundabout, so I think sort of £75 per month, but that comes with an awfully large amount of channels which we will never watch, as well as 150 megabit fiber. Sadly, not symmetric, and that's the one thing which I'm really missing from being in the office, because we're used to pushing fairly large amounts of data up to the cloud and pulling it down. And when I'm sitting here at home, pulling data down is not a problem, but the moment I'm trying to push something back up, it's like, yeah, now's a good time to go for a walk in the garden or go and make another cup of coffee, and this is going to take a while.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, I can see that. Hey, regarding geography, I've got a geographic nugget for you to chew on here. So you're the former royals, I guess. I don't know what you call them. I don't. Are you a royal person? But Harry, who's probably one of my favorite royals. Meghan, maybe not so much, but they just live up the road from me now. So
No way.
yeah. So I'm here. I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, and I'm actually very close to Butchart Gardens, which is kind of a well-known, I don't know, supposedly world-famous landmark. But so we're on a little peninsula here, and probably maybe 7-8 kilometers just up the road to the north of me. That is, it's a very ritzy neighborhood, and that's where the royals are now living. Yeah, they're in a nice waterfront estate, which is very easily protected and guarded, I'm sure. So, yeah.
You know what, we've watched all of that going on here with a certain amount of wry amusement. I mean, anybody who marries into the royal family, I take my hat off to, because you are going to come into a world which is very formalized, almost ritualized, and everything that you do is going to be scrutinized to the millimeter by the media. And actually, when Harry and Meghan said, you know what, we don't want to live our lives like this, we're just going to say thanks but no thanks and go and live together, I had an awfully large amount of respect to them. And I don't think it matters whether you're pro monarchy or anti monarchy, or someone like me who's sort of kind of agnostic. I'm not particularly
Take it or leave it.
yeah, that's me. But for them to sort of have the courage of their convictions and say we don't want to live under this scrutiny and to be part of this, I think they made a very, very brave decision to give up a lifestyle which was immensely privileged, but also immensely restrictive and constraining. So good luck to them. Even
Yeah.
though, of course, they're not allowed to call themselves royal anymore as part of the settlement.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, there seems to be a little
Excuse me.
confusion about that, but I think it's working out well for them here, because what's happened in the city, initially there was a lot of excitement and hype that, you know, all these sightings of the royals, particularly, you know, it's not like they'd just be at the supermarket, you know, Meghan and Archie shopping type of thing, but there was a lot of sightings of them hiking and, you know, walking their dogs and whatnot. But then it evolved into, so if there was only a couple of people that, you know, snapped photos and shared, but now if you do that, you get the wrath of the population here. If I was to share a photo of where I saw them, I would be publicly shamed throughout the region and probably start getting hate mail and people at my door. And because the mindset is, leave them alone, everyone. And and I think they're getting that now. So, you know, if I saw them walking down the road, I'd probably just kind of, you know, wave and move on. It's pretty,
I think
cool.
that's nice. I mean,
Yeah.
that I can't really see that happening here, because the press are watching sort of all the time and pay handsomely for this sort of thing. But there's this weird thing that I think the royal family and are almost kind of more respected and more revered outside of the UK than they are inside of the UK.
Yeah.
It's you'll get you know, news coverage which is either sort of devastatingly negative or is really sort of almost groveling and fawning over their every move, and most of us are like, okay, fine, well, you know, this is nothing to do with me, we'll just get on with our lives. But I get that they're a sort of an export commodity, and there's tradition and everything else. How much place that has in today's society, I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. I hope if one thing comes out of all of this, anyway, I hope that maybe we'll wind up getting the Invictus Games hosted over here. That would be very cool. So, which I know
That
there
would
was,
be immensely cool.
yeah, there was talk about that for Victoria, and now with everything that's gone on, I'm not sure. So,
And it was nice to see how much coverage that got on the television here. I think when we had the Olympics here in London in 2012 and in the rest of the country, it really that plus the Paralympics and then the Invictus Games, all of a sudden people had sort of had a lot more to be able to see and to watch. And I mean, we sat and watched the Paralympics as avidly as we did the main Olympics, and it was really quite inspiring, and not just for myself and my wife, but also the children were really into this, and that's continued, and it's the same with at the risk of sort of verging into slightly controversial territory, I think it's the same for women's sport. So you know, women's football gets a lot more visibility. It's still not the prime time that the men's football is, but it's definitely available, whereas beforehand you wouldn't have been able to watch it. The same with the Six Nations Rugby Championship, which has now been gone on hiatus here when all of this happened. You were getting coverage of the women's Six Nations as well, and so if you're a rugby fan like I am, it's great because you've got almost wall-to-wall sport. It's you know, it's like you with your baseball. Come on, I see you on Facebook. You live, eat, and breathe that.
yeah, I do. I'm missing that, but luckily now we have lots of, that's what you know, the classic games are being, you know, run on TV. So I don't care if I'm watching a live game now. I'll watch anything. So now I get to relive all the, you know, all the best of the best games from the past. So, but yeah, I miss that now. The season should just be kicking off, I think next week or this week, but yeah, that's a bummer. And yeah, sport, part of our life interrupted. I know that was the hardest part. My daughter, she's a competitive rower, and you know, I felt bad. Her, you know, her freshman season at university just came to a crashing end right before the big regattas were supposed to take place. And they have a race here called the Brown Cup, and it's a really big deal, I guess, in the rowing world. And so this would have been her first Brown Cup, so they get all worked up about that, and it was canceled. So I mean, she was in tears, you know, when it got canceled. These are just one, you know, some of the many things that are happening now.
Well, I like to think that it's more paused than cancelled. So, you know, Tokyo have finally admitted that the Olympics isn't going to happen this year. That'll take place next year. Things like, you know, the football championships, the rugby championships, they're on pause rather than cancelled. And you know, we'll have to sit tight and see what happens with the COVID-19 situation when the NFL comes back on.
Oh yeah, right. So they have a bit of time, I guess. The summer, August, that usually kicks off.
Yeah, I have to see whether I'm going to renew my NFL Game Pass subscription for this season, so I can see how bad the Chargers actually do again.
Right. So yeah, I noticed that. So you're a Chargers fan? That was your team. I thought Raiders, but
no, I've been a Chargers fan since I was around about 12 years old. One part of my family relocated to San Diego, so and so a very early Christmas present was all of this sort of team strip which came through the mail for Christmas, and I had no idea what was going on until I started traveling to the States for business, sort of in my early 20s, and it was like, okay, I get this game now. It's kind of like rugby, but with commercial breaks and with a lot more body armor.
Right.
And I've been hooked ever since.
Wow, that's interesting, and especially the Chargers, because they're kind of a funny team. And now I have some very good friends in San Diego, and they were diehard Chargers fans. And boy, I mean, the move out of the city was just devastating for those people. So it's kind of
to lose your
fractured.
franchise. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like where we are here in Southwest London. Our local rugby team, Harlequins. It's like them deciding they're going to decant up to Birmingham. You know, there's so much local pride around your home team, and I can't really imagine that happening to your local team all of a sudden. It's like, well, they're not there anymore.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we would leave a big gaping hole. So yeah.
But thanks to the magic of the internet, we can still watch them.
Yes, we can. It doesn't matter. We can be fans of any team. It always surprises me the geography of fans, and you know how sometimes you have people there's always some kind of personal connection, but when I see, you know, people in Dallas that are New England Patriot fans and it often leaves me confused, but hey, anything can happen. You know what? It was you mentioned something really when we were chatting. I think before we recorded, you were talking about your kids and doing schoolwork and whatnot, their classes online. That was kind of maybe one of the last things we can talk about before we reach our hour limit here, which is going. So here, schools, meaning like K-12 schools, is canceled, obviously. But I think they've pretty much given up on the school year. But what I've found is a lot of schools are basically, I don't even think they've rolled out online teaching in any way. They've just kind of stopped, which
Oh, wow.
sort of, you know, surprised me and really kind of disappointed me, because I mean, it's really not that, it's not rocket science nowadays to, right, to roll out some kind of virtual learning. And if anything, the teachers will really benefit and learn from, you know, right, okay, this is how I author a online curriculum.
Very much so. I mean, I think it does vary very much by what part of the country you're in, and to a certain degree down to which school your kids are at. I think for the primary schools, so that's I guess sort of elementary level, I pretty much think they've just said, you know what, we'll just go on hiatus through the summer, and judging by the number of children who you see and hear in the back gardens of that age, I think that's very much the case. But for secondary school, so that's sort of middle and seniors, pretty much everybody around here is doing some degree of remote learning with varying degrees of success. I think we should count ourselves fairly fortunate that both my son's school and my daughter's school, they've known that this is coming for a while. It was always a case of when rather than if, and so they've done the prep work, they've done the groundwork, and whilst I'm sure the novelty factor for my two will wear off as the weeks go on, they're getting, you know, they go through their daily timetable. In some cases, it's face-to-face with the teacher. In some cases, it's pre-prepared with slides and stuff with email. I mean, hell, my son was even doing pottery downstairs in the kitchen the other day, which I was quite impressed with.
Yeah,
and
nice.
And it goes a long way to explain the weight of his school bag when he came home on the last Friday before schools closed. But no, it's so far it's working. Quite what they're going to do for end of year exams, I don't know, but I think they're going to just not make it up as they go along. They'll just take each challenge one at a time, and so far it's doing good. I mean, you know, where I'm sitting here in the home office, I live on a pretty typical London terraced street, so everybody's back garden overlooks somebody else, and you can see down the length of the road, and there's not that many sort of teenagers out in the garden during the school day, so they're obviously all doing something now, whether that's communing with the Xbox or the TV remote control or doing schoolwork, I can't tell. But I think, you know, there's going to have to be some give and take on this. I think the government over here have already said that for those who are due to sit there, the equivalent of their graduation That's going to be done on teacher assessment rather than having to go in and sit formal papers. So based on their coursework over the course of the months. How this is going to play out, I don't know. I really don't know. I think we just got to, it's a horrible phrase and I keep on saying it. We really do have to take this a day at a time. And we're mentally dividing the world into two buckets, which is things we need to worry about and which we can do something about right now and tomorrow, and everything else. And what happens school-wise in the long term, I think is in the everything else bucket at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think if anything, they'll probably this will plant the seed for the schools and others for the future. And maybe we need to plan for this. And right.
I think so, and also for workers. I mean, a lot of companies have probably spent a very, very large amount of money in kitting out their workers to be able to work remotely. And when things do get back to normal, I think some companies are going to say, well, we've been doing this for however many months. Do we really need an office now?
Right. Yeah. Do we need this much office space? And yeah. They said companies should maybe be looking at, okay, when this is all done, let's see if we can kind of qualify, how did this work out? What was the people's productivity like, that's a big trade-off, right? People want to make sure that their home workers are productive. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me with a team of engineers, not that they're overseen or monitored, but we can see the progress of the stuff that we're working on, and we can see commit logs going on, and it's obvious that people are still working. I guess in some other industries it's much more difficult to quantify that, and I think it will be very, very interesting to see how things are post COVID-19, which by the way still to me sounds like a JIRA ticket.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a global conspiracy going on here, just saying. But we shall see. I mean, I think there will be a lot.
Excuse me.
There'll be a lot of companies who are maybe sort of relooking at how their workforce interacts and how their workforce is judged to be productive or not productive. I just hope it's not done in a negative way, because for people who have managed to come through this, it's going to be sort of cause for celebration enough without any more uncertainty over their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Speaking of that, so this platform, I'm using Zoom here for our conversation and recording this, but apparently maybe it's part of the pro version. So if you're having let's say you're the employer and you're having your daily meeting or whatnot, or webinar with your team, it also has built-in capabilities so that I can see if you are actually paying attention. So so if your browser is active, or if it will indicate that, oh no, it looks like Gary is actually interacting on another part of his screen. So maybe he's playing a game in another browser or surfing Facebook. But I thought that was kind of an interesting part of the analytics.
Interesting and slightly creepy.
Creepy, right. So I can see, wow, it looks like, so that 60-minute meeting, apparently Gary was only actually paying attention to this browser a third of the time. So yeah, creepy. So you people who are out there on Zoom meetings for your company, pay attention. Yeah. All right.
Let's hope their usage doesn't go crashing as a result of that glowing endorsement.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, hey, we should get going. I've got to. I got a few things to do. It's now, what is it, 9 o'clock? It's almost 10 o'clock my time. So.
Yeah, it's coming up to 4:45 in the afternoon here, and I better go and do some more work, and then collapse with the family and see which streaming service we're going to binge watch tonight.
Right. Get outside for a little bit of air for that daily walk.
Oh, I
Yeah.
fully intend to, and I think I'm also going to take a stroll in the garden, or well, the matchbox size patch of greenery that we have in London.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Well, look,
I'll,
thanks for having me on, Glenn. I'm looking forward to being slightly embarrassed when I get to hear this back, and you know,
mhm.
keep fighting the good fight of geography. That's all I'll say.
The good fight. Yes, sir. Sounds good. All right. Thanks again, Gary. I appreciate it. And good luck over there. Be in touch.
Same to you. Stay safe and stay well.
All right. Thanks, Gary. Bye.
Be good. Take care. Bye, Glenn.